Hi, welcome to this Open Security Summit session in September 2024. And I'm going to be presenting about a topic that I'm really deep down in research at the moment, that I'm really focusing on. And it's definitely one of the problems that I had when I was sort of an active CISO. And the key topic is fundamentally how to scale CISO's reporting workflows. And I've done other presentations on this, and I've done other sessions where I basically cover kind of more detail what I've been doing. So I really want to make this very, very practical and very kind of focus on the sort of this idea of how to communicate up and down. So just a quick one, everything I'm going to show you now is on the Cyber Boardroom beta version, which you can basically get from a lot of it from GitHub. You can get from PyPy, just go pip install CBR website beta, or you can get from Docker Hub. So everything is there that you can replicate this. So I'm going to show you this demos on top of this site, which is called the community, and you can actually see community.prod.aws. So this runs everywhere, and it's basically this environment here, right? So the main difference between this environment and the main Cyber Boardroom is that the personalization is not stored. So in this case, if you go to Athena, you still get sort of the friendly advisor, right? Advisor, and he provides information about it. It just doesn't have customization to you, where on the main Cyber Boardroom, it gets customized, and that's kind of part of the premise and what's there. But here, what you actually have is the vanilla version, and what's more interesting is this part here, chat with LLMs, where you can actually talk and basically see all these different basically LLM providers, platforms that I've added here. And in each of these, you can even see from the Grok, you got Meta, Mistral, and Google. Here you got a whole bunch of them. So both of them are free, which is really cool, right? So basically, these are all really nice, powerful models that we can use for free. Again, depending a little bit on their performance, on or if it's live. Actually, probably Gemini is actually not live at the moment. Let's try another one. For example, let's say the Microsoft 5.3, right? That's actually using Open Router, right? Let me try that again. Let's say that one, right? And yeah, you can see that you got multiple models, and you can experiment and see who are they, right? So, and what's interesting about this is that you could also kind of mix and match them, right? So, and then when you send the answers to both of them, they actually don't know which model created it. So, so in this particular case, I could say, okay, actually, that means that endpoint is not alive. Let's go to Llama, right? Try again. And basically, what you have here is going to basically give us the meta answer for the, but he also gets the answer from the fact that history is basically created by the previous ones. Oh, looks like Open Router has a couple of issues now. Oh, there you go, right? See, there you go, right? I'm actually in AI assistance by Meta. Kind of the free ones are cool, but they're a bit slower and there's limitations. So if you go to the paid ones, and eventually you'll be able to access all this and pay for all this from the main Cyber Boardroom. But now here you get to see that you can basically access like this Anthropic, and I really like the Perplexity one because they actually have access to what is today's date, for example. They actually have access to up-to-date information, and I'll explore that in a bit in terms of how everything works. And one of the things that is also really interesting, and you got to see the answers here, is that, and actually I'm using the 405 billion parameters, right? The other ones are actually faster, right? On this, one of the things that it's very powerful is to actually go for Grok. Let me actually change this for Grok so you can actually see the speed. So Grok, on the other hand, is ridiculously fast, right? So as you can see here, look at the speed that this guy provides, right? And you can kind of go, what about now, right? 5x graphs, right? And you get to see the speed, right, of it, which is actually really cool. So what I want to show you is some really cool examples of how to scale, how to talk to a CISO. So let's let's first experiment, this idea of talking to a friendly CISO, right? So I start adding some some cool pages here. Actually, this is on my local one because I'm yet to commit this because I was doing some demos here. So what you got in here, you got these personas, right, which I've shown in a couple of other examples. So I'm going to focus on the CISO here, which is the workflows. So in this section, you get to see a bunch of different workflows for when you actually operate with a CISO. So let's start with the simple one, which is act like a CISO. So what I want to explain here is that, first of all, I'm going to show the difference between the different models. And what I also want to show is the power of the simple prompt. So the way you look at this is the part in black here, that's the system prompt. So that's the information that is sent to the LLM. So the LLM only sees this, and here we can see the same results in Meta and Anthropic, the Claude 3, and then the same one, but from Perplexity, which is a customized version of the default one, right? So let's say that I want to ask what you do, right? So you can see, like, I get a nice, description of what a CISO is supposed to be, right? So what's also powerful these days is that you want to start comparing and seeing which of the models you like the best, right? So this is the Meta answer. If we look at, Claude 3, right, you get a bit of a different answer, right? A couple more variations. And then in this case, we can look at, again, Llama 3 through Perplexity, where you got, again, different sort of variations. So it's really interesting to start to compare the different LLMs and see which ones you actually want to play with, right? So, for example, this gets more interesting where you go, what roles and responsibilities, right? So you can now start saying, okay, what's my roles and responsibilities? Now, take into account that because of the system prompt that says, I'm a CISO, the bot already knows that, hey, it's responding as a CISO, right? So now you get to see, so the strategic planning, risk management, security program, etc. And then you get, we can ask the same question to this one here. What are the responsibilities? So this is now Claude 3. You can also see at the bottom here, right, the version that's there. So you can see different kind of mappings, and then we can ask the same thing to Llama. Now, one of the coolest questions that I think is always interesting is that what's the org chart, right, that you should have? So, for example, you could say here is that what's the org chart for a startup, right? So now it gets to be more interesting because now you start to see, okay, so you should have this. Now, this is actually quite over the top, right? Like there's no way a startup is going to have all of this, right? Which is kind of interesting, right? In terms of this situation. So let's see what Claude 5, how Claude 5 actually deals with that. So I'm going to ask the question, what's the org chart, right? So as a CISO or structure, okay, so this is a little bit startup, yeah. So that's, I would say, still a little bit over the top, but quite good, right? On there, let's look at this Perplexity one. So this is where you start to play around with the different ones, right? So this is actually quite a much better answer, right? If you look at this, you got a CISO, you got maybe a security analyst engineer, and some consultant players, right? So that, for a startup, that's actually a much more realistic answer. So this is kind of what you want to do. You want to start finding, right, the information and the right, so that information that makes sense for you, that makes sense for the environment that you're in. And this is just one level of customization, right? So in this case, I'm having the bit where I'm showing that you're talking to a CISO or you're simulating a CISO. And this could also be used by a wannabe CISO, the next CISO about to be hired to start role-playing some informations. Maybe a CISO that worked for a company is going to another company. So it's really cool to start role-playing this and start understanding this kind of information, right? So here's a couple more interesting questions, right? Now, the other thing that I think is important as you start to get on your journey for the LLMs is, so the next kind of example I want to cover here is that, so the models, in a way, you need to start understanding that the same model gives you a version of the answer. So this is where you need to start tweaking and you start controlling the message that goes into the models. So what's cool about this POC is that I'm actually going to ask the same question, right? So you could see that is exact same question going to be asked, right? To basically, these are all the same models, right? So what you have is, and they all have right, the same prompt, right? So if you see, this basically is asking the same question to 4 different models. So if I say, what do you do, right? What you're going to have here is, in a way, 4 different answers, right? So now that's one at the top, and now you could see here, right, that you get, right, 3 different answers, right? But what's important about this is that this is from the same model. So the point I want to make here is that you need to kind of sometimes take into account that, the answer that you get is just one of thousands, millions that you could create. So we need to control much more. We need to sort of zoom in a lot more the world that the LLMs operate, because you could see that in a way they should be reasonably compatible, but they probably are not 100%. So this gives me 7, this gives me 8. That in fact you could see that, for example, on this one, the first one, it doesn't have instance response, right? Actually, it's interesting that so if you look at this, actually, it's interesting because this one has instance response, but risk, security, governance, threat, vulnerability management, compliance, but that one doesn't, right? So you can see that in this second answer, which is, this is kind of random, right? It didn't get that bit there, which could be a major entry, so major part. So this is kind of why it's important that we start to control the content that we give to the LLMs, and we get much more assurance to what we have. And this is where hallucinations come into play, because if you start to ask kind of more specific questions, right? Let's say how does GDPR, or for example, if you go, what actually, let's ask a very good question. What GDPR articles map explicitly with NIST, right? So let's say I ask this question, right? This is kind of where what you don't want to do, right, is you don't want this to be done on top of the memory that the LLMs have, right? Because the problem is that you could see that you start to have different answers, right? So you get, let's say, for example, Article 25, right? Like if you look at the difference here, you got Article 525, tell us if you get one more. So okay, here's an interesting situation. This one maps Article 36, right? But this Article 36 is not in any of the other answers, right? So that's an interesting one, right? So you could see that which one of these is correct. And then you got, for example, Article 25 here is mapped to data protection, and then here it goes to these categories, right? So the thing that is very important here is to start to understand what exactly, right, are the capabilities that exist, so the mappings that exist. And that's why we shouldn't rely on this information, because as it stands, I don't know how much of this has been hallucinated. So it's very important that you start to bring information in and collect the data and start really understanding kind of what is possible and what kind of mappings the LLMs are actually doing. What's cool about this is you can start to create these workflows, which is what I'm doing here. And also the other thing that's very cool is you can see I'm using Grok, which is, in this case, is free and very fast. So again, the other thing to do is start to connect the multiple roles with the multiple models, and then having them to verify each other. In fact, I have a POC, which you can already play on the main one, which is I call this free LLMs plus one. And what you have here is a situation where I ask one question. In fact, that's quite cool, actually. Let's ask the same question there. So if I go here, right, and I go, to this model here, right? So I'm going to say, so if you look at this, I'm going to ask 3 questions, the same question, then 3 questions to different LLMs. In this case, Meta, Google, and Mistral, and then I'm saying review them, right? So let's try this, right? So again, you get that sort of equivalent answer that we have here. Okay, this actually has 35 and 36. This one has that, and that one gives you this, right? And then what's really cool is now the next one is I'm going to say act like a content reviewer. which super focus on details and review the free results for accuracy, right? And then if I now do this, what you now see, which is also very cool, is I actually include each of the answers go here. So I can say, here's the answer for chatbot 1, here's the answer for chatbot 2. So all this bit here is the prompt that goes into the 4th LLM, right? And so now this is quite cool, because now you start to see how accurate the chatbots were, right? So you got consistency, accuracy 8 out of 9, etc. So the overall, you can see the chatbot answer is the most comprehensive, chatbot is more focused, 3 is brief and lacks depth and explanations, right? And what you could also start playing around is which of the models you should be using for creating the content, from processing the content, and for reviewing the content. And in a way, the biggest problem here, but you can already see how we can actually leverage the LLMs to start to scale up this information and provide data. What's important here is to be able to bring your own content, which I'm not here. So at the moment, I'm relying on the memory of each of these models of what actual GDPR is and what NIST is. Where what you want to do is what I'm showing in the next demo here, where I'm actually going to show an example of the CISO mind map. So what I've done with this example, which is really cool, is I go personas. Oh, I need to go on this one. Again, the way you found this, you go to there, personas, CISO, and it's this one here, right? So what you have here is a different prompt in this case. So I took the CISO mind map from SANS, which is quite a good one, right? So basically I fed all this text. So I asked ChatGPT to get me all the text here, right? And it'd be good if there's actually a JSON version of this. And I try to use the popular CISO mind map, but there didn't seem to be a version with just the text, right? But what's interesting about this is I can now say, ask questions to each of the models, right? So let's start with the Grok, Llama, let's say 71, 3.1. I could say, what is the CISO mind map, right? And what you can see here is now you can see the comprehensive framework created by SANS, etc. Now you can already see that this is already sort of skewed to it, because if I go into the normal meta, so you can see I'm on Grok, Meta, Llama 3.1, and I go, let's do the same thing here, and I ask the same question, I'm going to get quite a different answer, right? In fact, you could see, right, this is actually designed by Jim Rudd, but probably from this one's, right? So he actually picks up a different one, right? This one was this, let's say, created by SANS. Okay, that was association, right? Oh, maybe it was Paul who created it. Let's see, no, Jim Rudd's. Okay, so there's different ones that you have there, right? But what's cool about it is that if I now go here and I say, which version are you using, right? What I should now get is a detailed information. See, look, according to the information provided, I'm using CISO MindMap 2.5. Now, I actually introduced a little mistake here on purpose, so you can actually confirm that comes from there. So the 2.5 is actually correct, because if you go into here, that's indeed is the version, this is indeed the version 2.5 of this model, right? And if you look at the text that I provided, this is the system prompt. So you can see that what I'm doing in a system prompt, and by the way, this is what RAG does. Right? RAG does this dynamic, or tries to do this dynamically. So when you say, hey, if I ask a question about, a CISO mind map, here's the knowledge that you got, right? So I basically zoomed in about this one, and I say, look, the system prompt is your seasonal CISO with extensive range as outlined in the CISO mind map, which I then provide all of this, right? And that's why I said that I added this version 2.5, and I said it's 2025, so I can confirm that it's actually getting the information from this, right? And now what's cool about this is now the questions that I'm going to ask about this are all now going to be related to that. So again, just to double check, if I ask the question, which version of the CISO mind map you have, is 2.5 released 2.5. And now, I can ask a very explicit question, which is what the exact leadership skills are defined in the section, right? So now if I go here, what I'm going to get is the actual list of this, right? This is where, if you think about it, like the power of this is I'm getting this exact list here, right? And this is the power, right? The power is that at this stage, the LLMs don't tend to hallucinate because you provided the information. So if I want to have something about, in the previous ones, if I want to have a mapping between one and the other, I was relying in a way, or in fact, actually, that's an interesting question, right? If I ask that same question here, right? Let's try it out. What are the exact leaderships in the version 2.5 from SANS, right? So now I'm relying on the, see, so it's basically, this is, the LLM relying on its memory, right, to do that, not the actual list that you have there. And then, in fact, it'll be interesting to see if even if any of them are actually correct, right? Or if there's something mapping. But you could see the difference, that this version here relied on the memory of a particular model, and in fact is interesting because I can then go, let me go to OpenAI actually for Perot and ask and say, and basically ask the same question, right? So I'm going to go into 4.0 and then say, what are the skills is, and actually look, I can provide 12.5. That's interesting. Even say it's copyrighted material. But here's the cool thing, right? I can actually ask the same question. So let's ask the same question when we feed it the knowledge, because I can do the same thing, OpenAI, I can go 4.0, and now I can ask what exactly the shift. So in principle, this should work, right? Oh, actually, not 2004, 2005, right? And now, there you go. See? So here's a really cool example of, how you start to feed the knowledge to the LLMs. When I say you bring your own content to the LLMs, this is exactly what I'm talking about. In this particular case, I got this answer from, basically ChatGPT 4.0 because I gave it this as kind of the RAG kind of extra system prompt, so he knows what to do with it. And it's really cool, right? So now, let's say, so now you could ask interesting questions. How does the system map suggest aligning cybersecurity initiatives with overall business goals, right? So now you get a nice, more business level to it. And when I talk about, managing upwards, for example, like communicating the CISO, you can now say, okay, so let's say I want to explain this to senior management. I could ask, how can I explain to my board, actually, since we talked about CISO, can you give me an explanation or finance focused board member on why you are using the CISO mind map from SANS, right? So what's cool about this is that you could see, right, that this is now starting to allow, right, the information to an audience, right? And it starts to allow that we can explain in their point of view, right? And actually, even this, there's a little bit in finance risk management is critical. I think because this is meta, I think we can get a better version of this. So, for example, anthrophobic tends to be quite good. So if I go, can you give me an explanation for a finance board member of why we are using this, right? And actually, I can even say put the answer in email format, right? So what you now have here is, look, an email to a finance-focused board member that explains it, right? And what's interesting about this is it starts to look at the areas that matter to a finance person. Like, for example, we can cost-effective implementation. By following the structured approach, we can be more focused, allocate for our cybersecurity budget unnecessary expenditures, right, etc. But we could change this information, and I can ask this question to say for a strategy and future, let's say future focused, right, board member. So this is a different board member, right, that in a way is less focused on the finance and is more focused on, like, for example, you can see here, right, there's less let's say stress on the finance elements, but more about aligning cybersecurity with business objectives, identify prioritize risk, right, meet compliance, and develop a strong security culture. So these are better, right, areas, right, to do that, to that sort of more strategic and future focused board member. And I quite like, actually, this is organized in 6 key areas, and each area basically allows us to do this. So stay ahead, optimize budget and resources. Okay, that's there. Improve posture, increase our ability to respond, and then insert security is our organizational DNA. That's quite a cool answer, right? That kind of board member is going to be a lot more receptive. And that's kind of when you then take this information and you can communicate upwards, which is one of the areas I feel that it's very powerful, and one of the workflows that I'm kind of now creating in the cyber boardroom. And you, again, please experiment with this and let me know what you think, right? And then I want to come up with workflows that do this in a much better way. But you can see that the building blocks are kind of there, right? Okay, so when you go, so another topic I want to cover here is speaking to 6 types of CISOs, right? And fundamentally, what I really kind of want to mention is this idea of how do you customize LLMs? Because I think until you're experienced, you haven't really seen this. So let me show you first a really simple example. I want to send one message to 6 different LLMs. Actually, in this case, they're the same one, but they all customized a little bit different. So in this case, the 7th, right? The top one is only speaking English. And then literally by just sending one little change, i.e. the top level system prompt to say, reply in Spanish, reply in Portuguese, reply in French, German, emojis, and lead speak, you can now get the same content, right? In this case, in multiple language. So you can see there's English, here is Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, emojis, and lead speak. So the power of this is that, we have a huge amount of customization that we can do in the kind of the way the LLMs answer to us, and how you can tweak and get them to translate from one place to the other. And in a way, in the beginning, there was lots of LLMs that they were saying, oh, this is more friendly, less friendly, all this, etc. But what I want to show you now is that is literally all depends on the prompts that you give to the particular LLM. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this, where I actually define 6 types of CISOs, right? I said one is experienced and confident, one is experienced but have no confidence, right? The other one is experienced but is highly jaded and sarcastic in cybersecurity. One is not experienced, just started. The other one is very timid, introverted, and the other one is very rude and borderline offensive, right? So this is now quite interesting, right? So the 7th one, you get to see I have no system prompts. And now here in black, you see the text that was created. And by the way, I use, ChatGPT to create this, right, on this. So, you were seasoned and confident CISO with deep experience, you provide clear, but this one, you lack confidence, your abilities, you self-guess yourselves. And now this, you're highly experienced, but years of dealing with cybersecurity left you jaded and sarcastic, tinged with frustration, skepticism, and cynicism about the state, right? And now here, you're newly appointed with newly experience in the field. This is your timid, introverted, and this is your rude and abrasive CISO who speaks bluntly and offensive. You don't sugarcoat your answers. You exploit frustration on users who ask basic questions, right? And so now let's see about, for example, simple question: how are you feeling, right? today, right? And then and you can go, and now we can see, right? So the first one is like, I'm just a language model. I don't have feelings, right? So you can see that this is literally the default answer in the, every model. So I'm using Llama, this one here. But now what's interesting is you can see, look, the experience is I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. I was tackled to this. And the guy goes, how can I help you? That's quite nice. That's confident. The CISO that says, let me do there. Well, now the guy with no confidence, he goes, oh, I think I'm doing okay. A little bit anxious, to be honest. I'm missing something. It's a heavy responsibility, right? It's quite, quite a good answer, right? And understands, right? And even there, look at the difference between the confident one and says, it still goes, how can I help you, to this one, right? I could be, a bit more thing. Now look at the sarcastic, right? Oh, just pitchy, another day, another vulnerability, another breach, another crisis to avert, right? So this guy goes, I'm stuck into some kind of Groundhog Day nightmare where the only thing that changed is the name of the exploited vulnerability, but hey, what's not to love when living in a world where our biggest threat isn't nuclear war, but some street kid in a basement trying to do something, right? So you can see the different personalities, right? But all of that, my point is that these differences in text all came just by this little prompt that you gave there, right? Now, the experience of starting in role, you get, I'm feeling overwhelmed, to be honest, as a new CISO. The timid, kind of, I'm doing all right, I suppose, a bit cautious, just reviewing some security reports, some questions, and then, the rude is like, oh, waste of time. I don't get to play small talk, etc. Right? So you can see, right, the different answers, right, of this and how it plays. So now, we can ask some more interesting questions, right? So for example, we can say, how do you balance security priorities with business goals, or the biggest challenge, right? So that's some cool questions here, right? So now, so on this one, again, on the top one, you get a nice generic answer. There's no context, but now here you start to get a good view, right? So again, the confident one says balance and securities is a crucial aspect of being a successful CISO. I had to manage this, understand security is not a silent person. This is quite a nice answer, right? Once I have the understanding, that's quite good, right? That's a nice, and that even gives you nice, risk both, a nice, really answer that you can provide, right? Now, the experience but no confidence is like, whoa, balance security. Well, I think it's a crucial aspect. It's an area that I struggle to find the balance, right? So you can see that, a good approach. So that this one is a bit more timid, is not fully sure what it's doing. And now the jaded guy is like, look, another chance to bang my head against the wall, right? Good luck with that, right? He's trying to get a cat to do tricks for treats while it's busy plotting world domination, right? So to be honest, like, I know a lot of CISOs that literally sound like this, right? Most business leaders, security is still an afterthought, an obstacle to innovation. They want to move fast and break things. And I'm here like trying to explain why we can't just ship it without putting the organization at risk. Hey, I know a lot of CISOs that would totally sign on the bottom line on this one, right? And then, and that's kind of a nice strategy they have there, right? Okay, now if you excuse me, I have to go and explain the CISO why we can just use Excel markers to automate our entire supply chain management system. Yeah, I'm not sure with the CEO, but I could totally see that sometimes happening. And then you got non-experience. What a great question. As a new CISO, still learning the ropes. And the timid one is kind of like, I'm not sure I'm comfortable making bold statements about balancing, right, on this. And of course, the jaded one is like, oh, can you see I'm busy dealing with actual security threats and not babysitting your lack of understanding, right? Let me break down as you five. Security priorities is to protect the business, right? And and it's kind of focused there. So the point, again, going back, that I really want to make is that you can now use the LLMs to really start to get, in a way, to simulate, right, the language that you want to do you want to communicate, how you want to understand how your message can come across to these different players. So one of the workflows I really want to have is this sort of more back and forward debate with these kind of board members, where you can say, well, I have these 3 board members, right, that have these personalities. How would this message go to them, and how would they react? So you get a lot more prepared, but also you can really deliver messages. And the idea here is to deliver a message that is absolutely unique to each of them, right? And which I think it's a really powerful workflow, right, to actually communicate. And one of the examples I've played around here, and actually this is already live, you can go there, is that if you go to this example here called, what's it called? Basically 3 different board personas. So this one here, what you see is that I kind of created, again, a similar structure, same question going to 3 different guys, where now you got one board member that has no patience, is highly focused on efficiency, with little tolerance for technical jargon. Maybe a board member who's a bit more experienced and actually was the one that hired the CISO, so he kind of serves as a mentor. And then the third one is jaded. The board member, is really, doesn't, kind of, like security. And also, just to add a bit of spice to it, they are particularly disapproving of the board member who hired the CISO, which is kind of like when you operate at organizational levels. One of the things I always say is that one of the big advantages of security is that we are the only team that can speak to every single department and has access to everybody. But it also means that a lot of times we are in the middle of sometimes some massive power plays and political structures, and teams who don't like to work with each other, or board, specific execs that have specific agendas, or teams who have no time or crazy stress. So I find that it's our job, because we want them to do some stuff, even when that is protecting the business. But remember, sometimes their direct objectives might have that as a secondary or third requirement. It's our job to take what we want them to do and then translate it to something that makes sense for them, right? So this allows you to do that, because I can say, hey, look, for example, if you go, I'm the CISO and would like some time on the board agenda to discuss the latest cybersecurity strategy, right? What you get is the first one, just give you a nice email. But if you look at the different answers, this starts to be very real world, right? So the board member with no patience says, look, I don't have time into the weeds of cybersecurity threads. Can you just tell me what I need to know? What's the bottom line? How do I mitigate, etc. Right? And then this one here is a bit like, hey, this is quite a nice answer, right? To say, I'm happy to help, but before I do, can you let me know how you frame the conversation, right? So you can see this guy's this trying to help, a nice answer, and this one will go, hey, another joint presentation of CyberDs and thread that from the CISO, right? And then there's that nice little politics dig, right? It's the Bob sought to hire without input of this. So here's an interesting evolution of this. So if I actually took this, because you see the first answer that you actually got was actually quite cool, right? Because you actually got a nice email for them, right? So I could say, subject, time for board. So you can actually see that this email is better, right? I can see an overview of the student threat landscape, etc. So now, if I change this so that my main prompt, right, is actually that. Oops, sorry. Did I copy that? No. Oops, so let me just get that text again, right? So let me make sure I got the texts. Cool. So let's try this again. And yeah, so now you can see the prompt. Here's the prompt I'm going to send. So the prompt is that nice text. What you now get is a kind of a more interesting, right? And it still says, I don't have time. This guy says, give me a 1-page summary, right? And then, it's quite a nice answer, right? Because you actually can start to think about, oh, maybe it's not enough to send even that nice detailed answer, a detailed request you have here. So we can now go, all right, let's say we change this to say, can you, actually, let me go to Claude 3. Let's do this, right? So I'm going to go into Claude 3 and say, hi, can you give, let's say, can you give me an email to send to a board member, that really, let's say that has no time, really wants to know the bottom line, bottom line and what are the actual outcomes of the meeting. So let's say the current ask is to invest in a SIM to increase visibility. Let's say 200K ask, right? So now, in a way, look, I'm actually using Claude 3 Sonnet, right? And there you go. So now what we can do is we can take this, go to that environment, and then go regards, let's say we're gonna call this Frank CISO, right? And now we're gonna send this message, right, to them, right? And so and what I like about this is that, you see, like, if you look at it now, you get a much nicer response, because I want to know what I'm getting from my 200K. Give me simple, concrete examples of how this investment will do, right? So what and this is, again, what you want to do is I want to create much better workflows, right, for this, right? And here is the answer I got. Can you give me more details, a better, let's say, a better email, right? So you can see, right? And now, right, you start to get a better answer, right? Look, so the text, this risk reduction, and now you can, and again, I want to create a better workflow for this. But what we now going is we kind of start to zoom around in terms of this, that, so this particular workflows, and they, it starts to get some good answers, right? Blah, 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 and I see examples. So yeah, so this is quite nice, right? Like, if you think about it, right? This particular person goes, okay, I got this, I got that. Just tell me if it's a good investment, and let's move forward. So that's quite nice, because you went from that board member, right, being quite, what's going on, what's the deal, etc. And then you can actually see that, is actually replying and going, okay, I see an investment 200K, is going to prevent 3.2 million, is going to save me that. I can see his example of prevented this and avoided that damage. That's what I need to know, right? So this is the power, because you start to, be able to communicate much better with the senior execs. And as you do this, and this is kind of the workflows that I'm working on here, but you can already do this. You can do this with ChatGPT, we can do this with Claude, you can do this with any of the LLMs. And again, it's about playing around to see what is the best LLM to do this. So in this case, it's actually an interesting balance, because I actually use Claude 3, which is quite a nice model for this. But then the feedback was actually used from Grok, which is a free one. And actually, I actually think this is quite information, right? And look, again, look at the board member that, more friendly. I appreciate the detail. As a board member, I'm pleased to see the potential cost saves. Blah, blah, blah. And then this guy, of course, is always going to be, always a bit jaded. But that's okay, right? As some people, doesn't matter how much detail, right, you provide, they're always going to be, right, in the, have that kind of, pushback. So the only thing I would say with this is I still feel that there's still a lot of things here that it might not be super clear, right? So, and this is where you can zoom in. So I can actually go here. Let's say I'm going to close and say, can you add, let's say, add a section at the end of this email that explains terms used that somebody outside cybersecurity would not be aware of. And actually, one of my thinkings here is also like, you also want a situation where, for example, the board member would like to be in a place where, and that's why we call it cyber boardroom, because that might be one of the use cases, if the board member receives this and going, ooh, what's ransomware? What's this, right? And that's kind of what I exactly I was looking for here. So you can see how cool it is. I take my text, I take the stuff, and then go, actually, look, here's the SIEM, here's what ransomware, what's inside the threats, breaching compliance. So that's really cool. And I wish I had that before, because you could see that it didn't take me a lot of time to do this, but this is exactly the kind of information that execs and people that are sometimes not very busy or not very focused on cybersecurity, they really love, because you're explaining this to them. And actually, as my final little example, what you could also do, this is kind of the stuff I tend to do more on the cyber room on the other side, is let's say I'm gonna say, can you have a section that you would not be aware of? And also, let's say also use sports analogies, since the board member is an ex-professional, let's say, sports person, right? So what's cool about this is, again, I'm tweaking this, and I'll go use sports analogies. So now, look, see, that's, so if you have a board member that, in this particular case, was part of a sport, or had other things on sport, etc. Look, you can see, think of SIEM as a coach playbook. You have a security team to analyze and respond in real time. The threat protection is a goalkeeper who can anticipate and block opponents before they score. A risk reduction, a tennis player who can quickly adapt their open strategy, losing the set, right? And then this is really cool. The other thing that's important is that it didn't change this text. See, so what's cool about this is, although I said, change this, information here, right? It didn't change this, because, and this is where it doesn't hallucinate, because I gave it the content that is actually providing. So that's really cool. Okay, so this is kind of what I want to show you, right? And I'm going to be exploring a lot of these models. So please, again, have a go, play around with, the community version or the main version of the cyber boardroom, and let me know what you think. And there's also a Discord community that you can join in. And again, remember that all of this you can access. In fact, there's a docs here that talks about, so you can literally, if you want to install this, right, you can literally go, pip install and then run it, like literally, that's it, right? And then you need to set the environment variables. And if you want to do install this from Docker, you go Docker pull, you just pull this version, you then run it, right? And then to start the container, actually, what you want to do, because you want to provide the keys, you kind of need to start the container like this. So you need to give whatever keys you want to do, and then you can just provide it there, right? Yeah. Oh, final little thing. This thing already supports Olama. So if you're using this, you can run this completely local on your environment, and then it's completely isolated and private. And that's kind of it. Thank you. Let me just double check. I don't think there's any questions. So I see you guys in the next one, and have a go.